A show I really got into in my childhood was Thunderbirds. Created by Gerry and Sylvia Anderson and using marionettes, there was something immediately captivating about the adventures taken by International Rescue, and thankfully it's a series that still holds up incredibly well years later, as when you watch it as an adult, you can even better admire the incredible craft that went into making it and the stories the writers came up with. There's a reason why, since its premiere in 1965, Thunderbirds retains a devoted following. Like I said, the show centered on International Rescue, an organization dedicated to saving the lives of people in danger. The idea came to Gerry Anderson after seeing one such disaster on the news and wondering if there could be a way to rescue people quicker than waiting for the usual operations to show up. Thus, the notion of using rocket ships that could travel at top speed came about. International Rescue is led by former astronaut Jeff Tracy, with his sons manning the 5 Thunderbird ships, and they live together on a South Pacific island where they keep the operations top secret. And I do mean top secret, as they don't even allow the ships to be photographed and filmed, so nobody can figure out how they work and where their base is. On the other hand, these are giant brightly colored vehicles, so they're hard to miss if you're nearby. The writers came up with a decent variety of storylines, allowing for new problems for the Tracys to solve. Sometimes the disaster is caused by intentional sabotage, others by accident, and others from just carelessness on the part of the people in charge. There's one episode where a building catches on fire because of someone driving too quickly into the parking garage, and then the emergency controls trap the family inside with seemingly no escape. There's another episode where a bank employee gets stuck in a tightly sealed vault because his coworkers don't realize he's still in there. There's even one where Alan Tracy and his grandmother are the ones who need to be rescued. This one was particularly unique as the story started in the middle and then it used flashbacks to show how they got into that situation. What helped make Thunderbirds so exciting was their actual stakes, with characters often close to death. They even had the puppets bleed on occasion just to add to the seriousness of the situation. Each Thunderbird had a specific function, with the Tracys immediately deciding what was needed for that mission when the call came in. The agenda of International Rescue was always about the importance of saving as many lives as possible. Even if there was some billion-dollar machine that could be destroyed, the people always took precedent. The members of International Rescue also managed to stand out and prove their importance in each mission. There was of course Jeff, who was the stern leader, but often knew what to do when the time came. Of the brothers, Alan, the youngest and a former race car driver, was usually given the most development. As the oldest and the pilot for Thunderbird 1, Scott usually took charge on the actual rescue missions and worked closest with the local authorities. Virgil piloted Thunderbird 2, which was the biggest and usually needed to transport other vehicles, like the submarine Thunderbird 4, with him usually working alongside Gordon. And then there's John, who's relegated to being on Thunderbird 5, the outer space satellite station that takes in the distress calls. Is he the least favorite of Jeff's children? Seriously, only a few times does he actually get to do something other than listen to the radio and report back, but he still serves an important role. Meanwhile, there's Brains, who's responsible for building the machines used by International Rescue and even helps out when the mission needs an extra hand for certain technical problems. There was also Tintin, who took on various jobs like mechanic, with Alan and her seeming to have a thing. Lady Penelope and her butler and chauffeur Parker are the field agents, and they're usually given the comedic B-plot of the episodes. Sylvia Anderson served as the direct inspiration for Penelope and provided her voice, and her secret agent plots provide as much fun as the main storyline with the Thunderbirds machines. Now you might be wondering where Mrs. Tracy is. Well, she's not mentioned once in the entire series. There are no photographs of her anywhere on Tracy Island, and we're not even given any hint of what happened to her, like if she died or she and Jeff simply divorced. The boy's mother just does not seem to be a concern for them. Later tie-in books revealed she died in an accident, which likely inspired Jeff to start International Rescue to prevent other families from facing the same grief. But in the series itself, she was just not important enough. The closest thing to a recurring villain on the show was the Hood, who often sought to steal International Rescue's secrets. Although he's actually not in that many episodes, and despite being an occasional foe for the Tracys, only a few times did they come close to being face to face with him. While he would sometimes be defeated in comical ways, the Hood was nonetheless a threat, and even an expert master of disguise, but he also came dangerously close to stereotypical Yellow Peril territory. Even with the occasional criminals that the Tracys and Lady Penelope would encounter, Thunderbirds was not a villain of the week show, as it kept focused on the rescuing of people, with them only bringing out the guns and blasters if they absolutely had to. Something that might not be immediately apparent when first watching the series is that it's meant to be set around the year 2065. And while there are hints of this with some of the technology shown, Thunderbirds is still very much a product of the 1960s, particularly with the fashion and music depicted. However, that's also a part of its charm, and it fits right at home with the early James Bond movies and other action movies and shows of the decade. A huge amount of credit for the show's appeal goes to Derek Meddings, the special effects director. In addition to the incredible models he created, he also designed the Thunderbirds and gave them their distinct and iconic looks. He did an incredible job of making it look like they were really blasting off from Tracy Island and flying through the sky. His work on the show even led to him working on several James Bond and Superman movies, as well as Tim Burton's Batman. Next to the Andersons and the directing team, Meddings really was one of the most important people who contributed to the show's success. As for the puppets themselves, they were able to have a lot of personality despite being limited in how they could move. Nonetheless, the show's puppeteers and directors came up with a lot of clever ways to have them move around and make them as active as possible. And if there was something that was tricky for the puppets to pull off, they inserted close-ups of human hands performing that action. Even for running and walking scenes, they would sometimes have close-ups of human legs. Meanwhile, when there was a scene involving animals, they filmed actual animals or used stock footage. This even became a significant part of the episode Attack the Alligators, where genetically altered alligators run rampant. The alligators grow to large sizes, allowing for scenes where the puppets share the screen with them, and I think it's one of the most fun and creative episodes of the series. Another important ingredient in Thunderbirds is the music by Barry Gray. The triumphant march that served as the main theme was the perfect way to get you revved up for the episode, and the various other motifs, from the Tracy's theme to Penelope's theme to the ones that accompany the moments of danger, fit so well. Every episode, we usually have a scene of the Tracys going through the process of boarding their Thunderbird and blasting off, and this is something that could have felt repetitive. However, it's thanks to Gray's music that those sequences were always exciting as we saw them head off on another rescue mission. The first batch of episodes were originally filmed and edited to run 25 minutes, but when Lou Gray, who ran the company producing Thunderbirds, watched the pilot, he was so impressed he told the Andersons to make them 50 minutes instead, and even gave them some extra money to make that possible. So they had to go back and add new scenes, and yet impressively they never felt like padding, and the extra time also allowed the writers to further flesh out the characters. By the way, if that name sounds familiar, it's because Lou Gray also helped bring Jim Henson's The Muppet Show to screens. I guess he must have really enjoyed puppets. Even though this was a British television series with an almost entirely British crew, the Tracy family was American, and there was a reason for that. The Andersons felt that would make it easier to sell to American networks. It's also why they made Penelope and Parker as stereotypically British as possible, as it was thought American viewers would enjoy the characters more if they fit their perceived views of Brits. However, despite those efforts, Lou Gray failed to convince the US networks to pick up Thunderbirds, and because he was counting on extra funding from this to make more episodes, he decided to end the show partway through production of the second season. Nonetheless, they still managed to make 32 great episodes out of Thunderbirds, which immediately made the show a cultural icon in the United Kingdom. The adventures of international rescue did not stop there. Gray saw big screen potential in the show, and so a feature film was produced titled Thunderbirds Are Go. Released in 1966 and distributed by United Artists, this sought to take Thunderbirds to even greater heights, and I think it succeeded really well at accomplishing that. Under David Lane's direction, we get a lot of exciting action sequences as International Rescue tries to help a spacecraft take off to Mars. The movie is able to expand on the world and do new things with the characters. Alan gets a dream sequence that features a fun musical number, and this even throws aliens into the mix. If you like scenes of spaceships docking and taking off, Thunderbirds Are Go gives you quite a number of them. Other people might find their patience being tested, but I personally don't mind them, as they showcase the incredible model work. The main set pieces are the big rescue missions we see, with Barry Gray once again composing a terrific score to accompany them, and Derek Meddings putting out all the stops with the special effects. Unfortunately, the movie would end up a box office flop, with the Andersons believing that audiences did not want to watch a movie of something they could just catch on television. Much to their surprise, United Artists thought it was worth another shot and commissioned a sequel. Titled Thunderbirds 6 and released 2 years later, this was a more lighthearted movie than the first one. Essentially a globe-trotting adventure, a lot of it involved Penelope, Parker, Alan, and Tintin as they travel in an airship through various locales. That does allow for a nice variety of locations, and there is some creativity to be found in how they're depicted. Some of the highlights involve stunt sequences with an airplane filmed on an actual road in Buckinghamshire, England, which even got the production team in trouble with the Ministry of Transport. There is an unusual subplot where Jeff demands brains to build a new Thunderbird and keeps rejecting his prototypes. The whole movie seems to be building up to the reveal of Thunderbird 6, and what we get is a pretty big letdown. The film as a whole is solid and enjoyable, but like Thunderbirds Are Go, this too would pull in disappointing grosses, putting an end to any more sequels. In addition to the UK, the Thunderbirds television series would find success in some other countries too. One of them was Japan, and in 1982 a local animated series inspired by Thunderbirds started airing. Dubbed into English as Thunderbirds 2086, I never even heard of this show until I started researching for this video. I watched some episodes, and it made for an interesting curiosity. As the title implies, it's set about 20 years after the original series, and as International Rescue turned into a much bigger operation. I guess it's possible that Jeff Tracy would eventually decide to expand the organization beyond his family and closest acquaintances, although it functions more akin to the Federation from Star Trek here. While the original show was very much of the 60s, this show was absolutely made in the 80s, and everything from the title font to the music. There's also a clear Star Wars influence with the way the rockets are designed, and particularly the scenes set in outer space. The general Thunderbirds concept remains intact though, as we see the main hero seek to rescue people from disasters ranging from malfunctioning space stations to forest fires. I personally did not think the characters particularly stood out, although I did not watch every episode, so maybe they would have eventually grown on me. However, what I saw, Thunderbirds 2086 remained an intriguing way to take the idea and show what International Rescue might turn into in the future. In the early 90s, Thunderbirds saw a resurgence in popularity in the UK when the BBC started airing the show for a new generation to enjoy. Noticing this and having recently purchased the rights, Polygram started development of a live-action movie. Peter Hewitt, the director of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, was chosen to direct, while Carrie Kirkpatrick was tasked with writing the screenplay. Even though he had not heard of Thunderbirds when he was offered the job, he eventually watched all the episodes and wrote a script that was apparently faithful to the spirit of the series. Pre-production went as far as designs and talking to potential actors, with Matt Damon being seriously considered for Alan Tracy. However, for various reasons, the script never got off the ground. Shortly after, die-hard writer Steven DeSouza would pitch a radically different take, but then Polygram was bought by Universal, which put the project on hold for a while. Eventually, William Osborne pitched a story that leaned younger than the previous proposed scripts, Jonathan Frakes was hired to direct, and the live-action Thunderbirds movie reached screens in 2004. And, well, to say I hated this movie would be an understatement. I thought it was a complete insult to the series, with no understanding of what made it so special. However, it had been a long time since I'd watched it, so I thought I should give the movie another look, and I still don't like it. The biggest problem is that they decided to turn it into basically a Spy Kids knockoff, and it does not work. The movie aged down Alan Tracy and made him whiny and unlikable, while the other Tracy brothers are barely given any personality at all. Jeff Tracy is not much better, and I just did not get much of the family bond here. The most baffling decision is when the film decides to stick the other Tracys on Thunderbird 5 through a good chunk of the movie, while Alan, Tintin, and Brain's newly added son run around the island and participate in Home Alone-style hijinks. Ben Kingsley plays the Hood and hams his performance up, and a lot of the attempts at humor just eye-rolling and not the least bit funny. The closest the movie comes to capturing the spirit of the original series are a few moments where we see International Rescue actually saving people. The problem is everything else surrounding those moments, which are annoying and way too dumbed down. And just to add further salt on the wound, Gerry Anderson's name does not appear anywhere in the credits. You know, the actual co-creator of the show this movie is supposedly based on? Not that I think he wanted his name associated with it, considering his own negative feelings when he eventually watched it. So this is a terrible adaptation, but even looking at the movie on its own terms, it's just a corny family film with one-dimensional characters, bad jokes, and an unexciting plot. With the way it concludes, the filmmakers were obviously hoping this would turn into a franchise, but it performed so poorly those plans were dropped. Nowadays, the most notable thing about the live-action Thunderbirds movie is that Alan was played by Brady Corbet, who would later go on to direct the Oscar-winning epic The Brutalist. What a fascinating career turn. Ironically, that same year, Trey Parker and Matt Stone would come out with a parody of Thunderbirds titled Team America World Police. And even though they admitted to not being fans of the show, they did an impressive job of capturing the style of Thunderbirds, even with all the swearing and off-color humor. Gerry Anderson would actually see Team America, and while he said the profanity was not to his liking, he still enjoyed parts of it. Years later, Weta Workshop, the special effects company responsible for the Lord of the Rings movies, was given the go-ahead to create a new Thunderbird series, which was titled Thunderbirds Are Go and premiered in 2015. This one would be computer animated, although the sets used actual models. I watched some episodes, and from what I saw, the people behind the show completely understood the appeal of Thunderbirds while probably adapting it for this new incarnation. They take full advantage of the animation to have the camera swoop around in ways that would have been difficult to accomplish on the original series, and gave the stories the needed amount of stakes. They managed to stay true to the characters while also developing and expanding on their personalities. For example, John is allowed to be a lot more active here, with Thunderbird 5 having a lot of impressive new functions beyond just being a satellite station. Tintin was renamed and altered for this show, but not in a way that was detrimental to the character. I admit I did find Alan kind of annoying in parts, but the family dynamic remains intact despite the absence of Jeff Tracy. When it comes to Thunderbirds, the original series remains a classic with its incredible rescue missions, fantastic special effects and model work, and gripping stories. Whenever that countdown started and Jeff would announce Thunderbirds are go, there was always an excitement at seeing how International Rescue would save the day over the next 50 minutes. See you next time.